Last week I presented the theory that brainstorming may not be the best way for you to come up with ideas for your novel. That there are some people and there's some reasons why, and it's logical why brainstorming isn't the best idea. But I've used brainstorming a lot, and today what I'm going to talk about is the opposite. So why brainstorming could be a really great way for you to come up with ideas for your next novel. So join me today so that we can look at the opposite view and we can have two really good theories and decide what works best for you.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
I'm happy to welcome you to the Julia Monte channel. I'm really excited that you're here, and I'm really excited to be talking about writing. This is one of my very favorite things that I do each week, and so I'm really excited that you're here to join me. So let's talk about brainstorming. So again, last week I talked about why it might not be such a great idea for writers and what to do instead. And today I'm going to talk about why brainstorming actually could be a really great thing for you to do if you use it intentionally. And so let's talk about that. So just as a quick review, what is brainstorming? Brainstorming is just coming up with ideas, right? So whether we're writing, making a list of ideas down for our characters, for our plot, for our storyline, for our theme, whatever it is that we are trying to get ideas, we brainstorm, we come up with a big list, we make a web, so we can write everything down in one place and see it visually. We might use sticky notes with different colors so we can see different ideas. We might even use digital tools that have a way for us to highlight different ideas. So it helps us to organize our thoughts. It helps us to get our thoughts and ideas down, and it helps us to organize them by either color coding them or doing other things that make certain things stand out. Okay, so what does brainstorming, or what can brainstorming do for writers? The very first thing it does is it helps us to get those ideas out and so that we can see them. So they're not stuck going around in circles in your head, but that you're getting them down onto the computer, onto a piece of paper, so that you can see them. And it allows you the freedom to put everything down, not to judge it, but to get everything on paper, on the computer, so that you can actually look at it. It takes away the pressure of putting down the right thing and allows you the freedom just to think of possibilities. And again, just to get them all down in one place. The second thing is that it allows us to be creative and not logical. So when we're not judging and we're just putting out possibilities, we can really put down anything, and it's not ruled by logic, it's just ruled by possibilities. And that's really good, because when we're trying to be creative and we're trying to come up with ideas, we're trying to solve a plot problem, it's nice just to be able to have the freedom to jot anything down. And what can happen during this, non-logic brainstorming session is that you might come up with something that really is unique and interesting because you're not putting roadblocks in your way. It opens up possibilities, and you might actually be surprised of something that you think of that wasn't originally in your mind, or that you weren't originally going to include in your story, but it's the perfect thing because you allowed yourself to dream and write down anything that came to mind. Another thing that brainstorming does is that it creates momentum. So if we are just sitting there waiting for that perfect scene to come, or just, we might be stuck, if we just move away from our story and we just start writing anything, not anything, but we start writing down a number of things that could happen, or the way that a scene could go, or something that a character could say, or wherever you tend to be stuck, or even just possibilities on a novel to begin with, it starts to create momentum. So as we write things down, we start to get excited. Oh, well, we could do this and we could do that, and this could happen. And it helps us to see the various routes that you can take, and it helps you to move forward. But the key to brainstorming in a constructive way is to have some kind of structure to allow your creativity and curiosity to come through, and to follow through. The follow through is the most important, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Okay, the first thing that you want to do is you want to set a purpose for your brainstorming session. Define your goal before you start. Are you creating new story ideas? Are you trying to come up with the motivation for why your character is doing certain things? Are you trying to solve a plot problem? You might focus on just a question, like maybe, why does my protagonist fear change? What you don't want to do is have a question that's very wide, like think of stuff that can happen next in my novel or in my next scene, because it's just too much. I mean, you could do that, but you want to be as focused as possible. What answer are you looking for? The second step is to set constraints or limits. So, we don't usually want to limit our creativity, but if you do, you're going to be more focused. I mentioned this last week too, right? That one of the other options aside from brainstorming was to set some constraints or some limits by just saying, I'm going to create this one scene about, whatever it is that whatever you want to write about. But I'm going to put my character in this one scene and see how he acts or see what he does. Well, this is sort of similar. You're setting constraints for yourself. So you might say, I'm going to set a time limit. I'm only going to brainstorm for 5 to 10 minutes. Or my limit might be on a theme. I'm only going to write about this theme, all the possible ideas that I can come up with about forgiveness or about, any other theme that you're writing about. I want anything else, anything that I can, and any kind of scene that I can write, anything where I can show my character, even having to deal with forgiveness. So you're setting, again, these limits for what you're going to do. Or you can have structural limits. If you're brainstorming about plot, for example, you can brainstorm just about this one plot point. You can brainstorm about how to get to the midpoint or what's going to happen in the midpoint. So you want to set some type of limit so that it's not everything. You're not brainstorming about everything at once. You're brainstorming about certain little things and asking specific questions. The third step is to use sensory or visual triggers when you are brainstorming. So have you ever had an experience where you are visiting a place and you smell something, hear something, or see something that reminds you of another time? So I have this a lot when I go into a building, especially on the East Coast where there tends to be more humidity, and I can smell that sort of musty smell, which doesn't usually smell so good, but it reminds me of my grandmother's condo in Argentina. That when I smell it, it's like it takes me back to her home, and it wasn't a negative smell. It actually smelled really good because it also had like her scents and everything. But the smell of that humidity in the air reminds me of my grandmother and her condo, going to visit her and to stay with her. So sometimes you can have certain scents or certain smells that can trigger you to be more creative and to be able to brainstorm better and with more intention. The same with images or music or anything that will take you to what Let's say you're writing a super intense scene. What kind of music, what kind of scents, what kind of smells are going to make you feel that intensity that you want to transfer to your story or to your brainstorming, so that you can come up with the various scenes that could be tense enough for what you want to write. Again, what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get away from logic and linear thinking into more of that creative, nonlinear thinking. The fourth step is the most important, because this is what I was talking about following through, and it's grouping and labeling your brainstorm ideas. So once you get them all out, now the people that think that brainstorming is not a good idea because you are now having to sift through a bunch of stuff that you may not use are right in a way, but this is where I think they're wrong. Is yes, you have 100 things here. I know you might only use 20% of it. However, a lot of it may be connected to each other. So what you want to do now is you want to write everything down. So let's say, for example, that so we're looking for ideas that can be connected. We're looking for themes that are repeated in your brainstorm ideas. And we're looking at something that could become part of a scene or something that could become part of your character arc, for example. So let's say that we have these 5 things. Okay, we have your character wants to escape her small town where she lives, or where she visits, well, where she's living, let's say. Okay, she's afraid of turning into her mother. So these are like brainstorm things that I wrote down, right? Things that I thought of. So she's afraid of turning into her mother. She secretly loves the boy next door. She's hiding a criminal record, or she wants to win back her father's approval. Okay, so these are motivations. These are just ideas, just that, just brainstorming different things that I can create, because now what we're doing is we're actually building our story. Okay, so the brainstorming was just throwing ideas out there. These are maybe unrelated to each other, right? So we could say, well, none of this stuff is related. But once we start to label, and once we start to group, and once we start to really ask ourselves questions now about what we just wrote down, this is where we can start to create our story. So if we are organizing these 5 things that I just said, how do they fit together? Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. So maybe I could say, well, let's see, the first 3 are related. So maybe she loves the boy next door, but she is afraid of turning into her mother, and if she stays in this small town. So she chooses to run away from love, leave the boy next door, and go off and do something else, which may be leaving like the love of her life, right? But at this point, because she fears turning into her mom, she thinks she has to leave her small town. Now, the other thing that she's hiding from a criminal record really doesn't fit. Not if I want to go with that storyline. That she wants to win back her father's approval also does not match that storyline. It could be other things. So if I have written, these are 5 things, if I wrote down 100 things, there may be other things. So I can start to group them. Well, this one goes with the criminal record thing. This one goes with this, right? So that I can see how it fits. So it's important to really not dismiss anything that's in your brainstorm, because you may think, well, this sounds kind of silly, this sounds kind of dumb, but it could fit, right? It could fit because maybe it's metaphorical what I'm writing, maybe it's something else. How can it fit together? You can color code these things, you can group them together. If you're doing this digitally, you can move them into maybe a chart with different things so that you can see how some of your brainstorm might work for your character development, for your plot and your story development. So brainstorming is only helpful if you do this. If you take the time now to evaluate, to study what you wrote, to question yourself, like, what did I mean here? What could I turn this into? And the 5th step is, after you've done all this, is maybe just take a little bit of time to think it out. Just talk to yourself about it. So have you heard of verbal looping? This is where we talk to ourselves and we convince ourselves sometimes, or we just ask ourselves questions, right? And you've probably done it. Like, you've probably said, okay, well, let's see, driving home from work and I want to get some dinner. Maybe I'll get some pizza. Well, maybe not, because I had pizza earlier this week. I don't want to eat pizza again. I'm trying to lose weight. Probably better for me to do something healthy. Maybe I should just stop and get a salad, right? So you're talking to yourself and you're trying to come up with a solution, come up with a problem. And this helps for brainstorming as well. So you can do this definitely before step 5, before you start to analyze everything. But I put it at step 5 because I think it's a good thing after I have evaluated everything. I can talk to myself or pretend I'm talking to an imaginary friend saying, I'm thinking about this, writing this story. It's going to be a love story between hero and a heroine when they're young, and she loves the boy next door, but she decides that she's going to leave because if she stays in this small town, she's going to have the same issues and problems that her mom had. She doesn't really want this. She wants to try something else. So she leaves, she moves to New York to become this big executive, and runs into this guy again, 15 years later, right? So you start talking, or maybe instead of running into him 15 years later, maybe she runs into him multiple times. Maybe like 5 years from now she runs into him, but it's not the right time. And then she runs into him a few years later, or maybe that's right. And so you start to do this, what's called verbal looping, where you're just talking and talking and talking, kind of going around in circles until you come up with something that really is going to work. So with the brainstorming, you came up with a little bit of an idea, and now you're trying to develop it a little bit more. So what is brainstorming then? It's just coming up with ideas, and it's really a pre-writing activity. We have to do some kind of pre-writing activity. We all do it, whether we think we're doing it or not. Sometimes we do it in our mind. This just allows us to get it on paper. Even if you don't use 90% of the things that you wrote down, it helps you to get everything out and then discard the things that you don't want to use. And then you might have that 10 or 20% that's like, wow, this was really good. It's worth doing it just so that you can find the answers to some of these questions. Again, if you're focused, if you ask yourself specific questions, if it's not just some general thing about what you're going to write about. And the reason I like brainstorming is because creativity is not a straight line. It's not logical, and it allows you to, especially if your mind is sort of scattered, is just to get everything down on paper where you can see it and then use your logical mind to put things together. It's just like as if you threw a bunch of puzzle pieces on a table. It doesn't look like anything at first, right? Until you start to put certain things together and you're like, okay, well, I can see this. If I put this together, this is a car. And if I put these pieces together, it's a dog, right? So if you are someone who has a lot of thoughts, and creative people do, we have multiple thoughts that don't seem to have connections sometimes. This allows us to toss it all down. It allows us to go through it, to organize it, and to be able to see and probably find magic in our own thoughts when we didn't think it was going to be good. And you don't want to discard any idea, even if it sounds ridiculous, because it may sound ridiculous, but maybe as you go back and look at it. I gave an example last week about writing. Well, the hero turns into a dinosaur, and every time he gets angry, and then as you start to look at, it's like, okay, such a ridiculous thing. I don't write about dinosaurs. I don't write fantasy. I don't write this kind of stuff. Why would I even think that? But then as I go back and I evaluate it, I think, okay, well, I'm not really saying he's a dinosaur. What I'm saying is that he has anger issues. He turns into this really horrible person. The reptilian brain of his, mind takes over and he's unable to control, which causes other problems within the story. So something that sounded completely stupid is actually going to be something like I could use in my novel because I am giving myself the freedom to toss everything out there. So, brainstorming isn't for everyone. It could be something that you might use, or it could be something that you might decide, no, I actually like the other theory better, that brainstorming isn't that good, but I can do other things like free writing and other things that I mentioned last week. So let me know what you think. Is brainstorming helpful for you? Have you used it? Is it something that you recommend to other writers? Is it something that you recommend to like your children when they're trying to write a paper or be creative? Let me know. And thank you for being here. Thank you for, I hope this has been helpful, and that looking at the two sides of this has helped you determine whether you want to try it or you want to try something different. But definitely you want to pre-write before you start your novel. You definitely want to outline too. Outlining is important. Even if you're not a plotter, just having a simple outline definitely helps. All right. Well, thank you for being here. I hope you come back next week. Please like, please share, and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.